Hi guys, welcome back to the Pageant Project. Hope you are having an amazing week. I'm trying a new way of recording this week. I'm recording on my recording software on my phone. So if it sounds a bit different or looks a bit different, I apologize. I'm just thinking ahead to when I'm probably going to be traveling for pageants next and I won't have access to my home recording studio. I want to get ahead and make sure that the alternatives are acceptable in video quality and sound quality. Quick reminder, this Thursday, the 20th of November, obviously depending on when you're listening to this, this may not be relevant, but we're doing our second mock interview session. So if you hadn't heard, I am experimenting with doing weekly mock interview sessions for the low price. I feel like I'm selling bargain basement. I don't know, secondhand clothes or something, but for the price of $19.99 US dollars. The whole purpose of these sessions is one, to gauge interest, to see if people are interested in having sort of group. It's a group session, so there's more than one person, but group weekly consistent mock interview sessions as a way of really improving. I think it's useful, but I want to see if you guys think it's useful. And you vote with your wallet, you vote with your attendance. If you think it's useful, you'll attend. If you don't think it's useful, you won't. So that's an experiment that's ongoing. But this Thursday, the 20th of November, hope I'm getting my dates right, because last week I said September, because I'm still in September apparently. But 20th of November at 8 p.m. EST. That's Eastern Standard Time, I hope, in America. I say hope because we have a similar name here in Australia. But 8 p.m. EST, do your time zone calculations. I will say for us in Australia, that's Friday, the following day at noon. But a group mock interview, $19.99 per session. If you're one of our paid members, then that's complimentary for you. If you don't know how to do that complimentary, then just send me a message and I'll get you squared away, but it's via a coupon code. And so all I need to do is send you the coupon code. We had our first session last week and I really enjoyed it. It was something new for me. We are using AI. I didn't use that too much last week. I'll be using that more this week, showing the girls and women how to use AI to help them with their prep. But also I was doing a lot of the instant video replay. So I would get the girls. I actually got all the girls on, all the women that were there. There were four of them, I think, and I got them to ask the questions, which I thought was really neat because part of what I wanted to do was give you a chance to put your judge's hat on and not only to ask questions, but to get a feel for what judges might be looking for, because I think that'd be very helpful for yourself. And so I was getting the contestants to ask one another questions, and then I was recording it right then and there, and then I would replay it immediately to the contestants so they could see what they looked like and hear what they sounded like. And it was really interesting because the feedback they gave to themselves was really, really clear. And they had really clear thoughts as to what they needed to work on. And this is what I keep saying. It's not my place as a coach to tell you what your vision should be in any field. It's my position as a coach. I feel my role as a coach to be your cheerleader, number one. Number two, tell you truths, even though they may be uncomfortable at times. But really, when you think of it, one of the most important roles for a coach, and this probably goes undersold, but one of the most important roles is literally just to be an outside perspective, because we get unstuck by our blind spots. They come to bite us in the butt really big. And really, I think what a coach is a chance for you to see your blind spots. And so it was really cool to see the girls. A lot of the time, I think they were seeing their own interview responses for the first time, which is scary because I think that's so important. But the feedback they gave themselves was amazing. But I will say that's part of the reason I'm incorporating instant video replay into these weekly mock interview sessions, is so that you get a chance to see just how impactful watching yourself straight away can be, because the camera doesn't lie. And I don't care whoever's giving you feedback on your interview, I don't care who it's from, it's not as important or as impactful in my coaching experience as having good self-awareness and being able to give yourself feedback and knowing exactly what you're bringing to the table. So if you want, that's, as I said, Thursday the 20th, this Thursday, 8 p.m. EST. You do the time zone calculations. Easiest way to book in, just go to pageantmock.com, as in mock interview, pageantmock.com. It will link straight to the booking page. You'll be able to book yourself in for $19.99. As I said, if you're one of our paid members, then message me for the coupon code, and you can be taking as many of those mock interview sessions as you like with no extra charge. What I wanted to get into for today's session, I often, someone called me the Pageant Shrink. There's a very well-known US title holder who's represented the United States actually twice internationally. And she represented a certain system and then came back to it afterwards as a, let's say, as an authority figure. I don't want to disclose too many details here because I think if I do, you better tell who it is. And when she came back as that authority figure or mentor, she was so disappointed in the organization that she'd previously been the title holder for that immediately the pageant was over, she messaged me. And it was a sort of stuff that you cannot disclose publicly. But I ended up getting on a call with her. And she, obviously, her disappointment was palpable. And she was right then and there pretty ready to give up on pageantry. In fact, I think, unfortunately, she pretty much did give up on pageantry because I don't think she's done anything since then. But I had a very, very long conversation with this title holder, and really, it ended up as a counseling session, so much so that at the end, she said that I should be called the Pageant Shrink, not the Pageant Project. And that really stuck with me because I have lost count of how many times I've gotten on calls, I will say at no charge as well, but I've gotten on calls with title holders where things have gone really, really wrong behind the scenes. And it's actually quite hard for me to, I would say, stay positive, given everything that I've heard about some very powerful and well-known members of the pageant community. I would almost say that my default setting is giant grain of salt. In other words, slightly cynical, because I don't like being taken for a fool, and I don't like steering people wrong because people come to me for advice all the time, right? And so I now have quite a cynical, or let's say when someone new approaches me, I look at them very thoroughly, probably a bit too much, like I'm reading into the signs. It's almost like, looking at the tea leaves, so to speak. But I do that not because I'm a cynical person, but because simply of the numbers of stories that I've been told that have gone on behind the scenes that for one reason or another, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you this, they just simply can't be discussed in public, at least not the way that pageantry is at the moment. I've been given contracts that are confidential and been asked for my opinion on contracts. I have been quasi legal counsel, legal advisor on legal cases, legitimate legal cases, and then sometimes almost legal cases. They've been averted at the last minute. But over this time, I have come to realize that my counsel or my advice is valuable to some people, at least, even if it can't be public facing. Enough people who have achieved a lot in the pageant industry have found my advice valuable, have sorted out. And part of that is me, I'm sure, but part of that also is I occupy a very unique position in the industry, which is that obviously I've spoken to so many of you. I'm very well networked, but also I'm still very neutral and objective because I'm not a director. I don't have a stake. I don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak, when it comes to results in a pageant because I'm not directing them. I don't own them. I don't have a share in them. And I say quite often, I want the best person for the job to win. I don't play favorites. The only way I play favorites is if I think someone is the best person for the job, then I want that person to win, if you can even call that playing favorites. But I get asked all the time for interviews. People want me to interview them. And being the sort of person that I am, I don't like telling people no. Sometimes it definitely would be a no, just because at this point in my career, this sounds terrible, but take it for what it's worth. There's no upside to me interviewing you. You don't have the experience, you don't have the following. And I think more importantly than this, I don't think you would be a good fit for the types of interview I do, which are not publicity interviews, right? That they are more deep, soul searching, but also entertaining and conversational types of interview. And there are very few people who are good at that sort of interview, because it's not a pageant interview, it's not a Q&A. And so I've had to find my way around that. I've also had, especially recently, numerous opportunities to. I've been invited to be a judge, to be a member on a board, to be an advisor. I've even been asked to send girls overseas, from overseas pageants from time to time. And what I want to get across to you is it's very important to know your worth in this industry. Because if you don't know your worth, and this goes back to the pageant shrink conversation I was having earlier, if you don't know your worth, it is so easy for people to take advantage of you and for things to go catastrophically wrong. And from my experience in the industry over about 10 years, there are two types of people by and large who get attracted to pageantry. One is you guys, the contestants. Now, if you're honest, especially when you were younger or you first entered, although that's a stereotype, but if you're honest, 80 to 90% of you probably entered for some sort of validation, regardless of whether you're willing to admit that or not. At some level, if you're dirt honest with yourself, you know that you entered it for a little bit of that validation, even if it was to get that sort of energy when you're on stage. You like having eyes on you. It feels good. You want that validation that, hey, yeah, I still got it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're aware of it. Anything taken too far can be bad, by the way. But that's the first type of person who's attracted to pageantry. The second type of person is a person who's looking to take advantage of the first type of person. Now, this could be directors, this could be photographers, this could be interviewers, it could be sponsors, anyone who gets their jollies by being surrounded by young, beautiful women who are hungry for that bit of validation. Now, obviously, I'm stereotyping here, but my point is those two groups of people do not intersect well. There are all sorts of bad things that can happen and have happened in the pageant industry precisely because those two groups have intersected very poorly. The first group looking for validation, the second group preying on people who are looking for validation. And I will tell you, if I'm thinking about it now, many of those conversations I've had behind the scenes that I can't go, that will never be public information, public knowledge, have happened precisely because there is one group that's preying on the other. And so it's so important to me. We're all seeking validation at some level. It's not a case of I will never seek validation again. I've had this conversation with people about fear. You can never be fearless. If you're only an idiot is without fear. You can't run away from fear. The only thing you can do is be self-aware of it, and then when it's rearing its head and it's not useful, to sort of dance with it rather than saying I'm never going to feel fearful again. In the same way, knowing that sometimes you're looking for validation, that intersection can end very poorly. So the antidote, so to speak, is not to say I'm never going to look for validation again and I'm beyond validation. I think the counter to it is to build your self-esteem, to know your self-worth, and then, as I like to say, add tax. I like that because I think many of us shortchange ourselves. So adding a bit of tax is a good thing. But building your self-esteem and knowing your self-worth. Now, I mean this in a very real way. I'm not talking about the toxic positivity or the toxic self-help version of, oh, you can do anything that you set your mind to. It doesn't matter what it is. And I remember being told by a coach once that you should say that you're world class. And I asked, well, what does it take to be world class? And he said, well, you just say that you're world class. I'm not talking about that kind of BS. I'm talking about knowing your self-worth in terms of what you bring to the table, the lessons you've learned, the skills you've learned, and those ones that you've had to pay, beg your pardon, blood, sweat, and tears to achieve. And there are certain things that most of you, I'm sure, there are certain skills that you really are, certain things that you are really, really are good at because you've paid your dues in those areas. And these are things that you need to be mindful of when someone is trying to take advantage of you. And it may not be a very, let's say, explicit way of them trying to take advantage of you, but there are people who are asking me to be on boards. There are people who are asking me to judge, and some of them absolutely are amazing opportunities. I'm not saying all opportunities that I'm being forwarded are bad, but I have to be very mindful that it is an ego stroke, right? It's validation when someone wants me to be on a board, or someone wants me to be an advisor, or someone wants me to be a judge. And I have to be very careful. I have to keep my ego in check that, okay, I could be a member on your board and it sounds good to me and I get to show or boast about the fact that I'm on a pageant board. But what is it exactly that you're asking of me? Normally it's time. It's expertise, obviously, but normally it's time. And I have to be very mindful where I spend my time, especially as someone with ADHD. I can say yes to far too many things and then get very, very fatigued and blow myself out. So I need to be mindful not to let that validation or that ego stroking blind me, but really look at it objectively and politely as well. I will say, by the way, and go, thank you so much for the opportunity. Before I say yes, can you tell me exactly what it is your expectations of me are? And so having a very a polite but objective conversation so that I know that what you want I can deliver, number one, but number two, I know what it is I can bring to the table after spending so many years in the industry and doing hundreds of interviews. I know what I can bring to the table, and so I know what that's worth. And so then chunking that back and going, okay, how much am I willing to, because very often these opportunities are for free, right? They're not paid opportunities. And so if you are asking me for an hour per week, an hour per month, that is an hour taken away from something else I could be doing that potentially could be income generating, or frankly, it could be me going fishing or playing tennis or taking time away from the industry. And so I've only come to this realization more recently because I've had to. Because when you don't know your self-worth, when you keep shortchanging yourself, it is far too easy for people to take advantage of you. Even someone, because going back to my very early days, of course, when I didn't know anything, anyone who would have wanted to interview with me, I would say, hell yes, let's do it. Because at that point, it's not that my self-esteem was low, it's that my self-worth objectively was lower. I could, and this is why I say it's not toxic self-help. It's not about toxic self-help. Back then, what I could bring to the table was less than it is now because I didn't know as much. And because of that, I was willing to interview practically anyone. I would have jumped at any opportunity to get involved because I didn't know anything. And if that's you, then I'm not saying allow yourself to be taken advantage of, but you take the opportunities where you can. I still want you to be forearmed, forewarned, and be smart about it. But if you're sitting at home, as an example, unemployed, and you've got nothing else on, your time isn't really worth that much because you're not doing anything. On the other hand, if you've represented your country multiple times, you've held multiple titles, you have raised X amount of dollars, you've had this amount of publicity, you have this amount of following, opportunities to you to give up your time for free are not going to be as appetizing because you bring more to the table now than you did before. What I want you to do is take an honest and objective inventory, a self inventory of your skills, of your self worth, of not your esteem, because that's a personal thing, that's more personal belief. But when it comes time to what is it that I bring to the table, I want you to take an inventory of that, because very often I find that we don't update that inventory as often as we should. And maybe your self worth or self esteem is based on an old inventory. Like when I was saying 10 years ago, I didn't know anything. Your self esteem sometimes is a bit slow to update. So, what are the skills that you've learned? And by the way, they may not be skills directly related to pageantry. They might be other industries or other fields, but they can still be valuable. So, what is it that you've updated in terms of your knowledge? What skills have you gotten better at? What network have you built? All these are valuable things that you bring to the table. And so when someone offers you an opportunity in inverted commas, or when you get to the negotiation table and you're negotiating a fee, your fee, whether it's in pageantry or not, or whether it's, well, frankly, any field where you are, even if it's in the interview room, and someone asks you, why should we pick you as our title holder? That's really when knowing what you are bringing to the table is incredibly important. And people very often use generic and vague terms such as, oh, I work hard, or I'm relatable. And it's all this stuff that I've become it's almost like red flags to me because I've heard them so often. What I want is not cliche. What I want is self awareness coupled with very objective proof that you go above and beyond in those fields. So if you're going to tell me, for example, that you work hard, don't tell me, show me. If you're relatable, don't tell me, show me. If you've worked charity, if you've done appearances, don't tell me, show me. Show me that your appearances are not just scattered and all over the place. Show me how you've been strategic. Show me how you've been able to um, handle multiple time commitments. How you've been able not only to juggle your time and be busy, but show me how you've been able to 10x your productivity, not just your busyness. And I will tell you, I think as pageantry evolves, especially as we bring pageant judges on who aren't necessarily inculcated in pageants. They're not pageant judges, they're not professional pageant judges, but they come from other industries. I think this is going to be a really good thing because it will bring outside experience, as long as these judges, by the way, are educated, that it's not looking for the pretty face. That's another conversation for another day. But assuming that they're educated in terms of what pageantry really is about, they are not going to fall for the pageant cliches. Can you imagine, for example, you get someone who runs a multi-million dollar or multi-$100 million, multi-billion dollar company, and they're sitting on that pageant judging panel. Number one, you can't afford to waste their time. Because when someone is running a company like that, it's all about time and money. You can't fool them because in business, it's cutthroat. And so any sort of pageant cliches you think will gloss over your imperfections, it won't work with people like that. And so take an inventory of what it is you bring to the table, because that is really going to build up your self-worth. I want your self-worth to be based on very real, practical, I can do this, I can do this. I bring this to the table, this to the table. And if you don't want that, that's fine. You're looking for someone else. I can deal with that. I don't, obviously, I want you to have self-esteem, but the self-esteem is more, as I said, it's that personal feeling of, it's like everyone is equal in the eyes of our creator. I believe that. But not everyone is equal when it comes to the business table, the negotiating table, or the pageant interview table. Not everyone is equal then, right? I get that you're all unique. That doesn't mean that you're all equally valuable when it comes to what am I looking for in my title holder. There's going to be one person that fits that bill better. And the point of you taking that inventory is to know your self-worth. So that when it comes time to that negotiating table, know your self-worth, add tax, but you are much less likely, it's going to be so much harder for someone to take advantage of you because you know what you bring to the table. And so, if a photographer asks you, the TFP, time for prints or whatever it is, maybe at some point in your journey, absolutely you should be doing that. But also at some point in your journey, you absolutely shouldn't be doing that because you've done so much. All the advantages to them, it's not to you. And that's been my journey as well. It is, I know the time I've put in. I know the expertise I have. Frankly, I also know the following that I've built. And this is where I get so confused when people who they follow me normally, but I have no idea who they are. And they randomly will tag me in a story or a post. And I feel like messaging them back and saying, stop tagging me and stop wasting your time. There is no way on God's green earth that I am sharing what you're doing because I don't know because I don't know who you are, really. I don't know what sort of person you are. I take my recommendations. If I'm going to share something, I take that seriously. Because if I share something that's untoward, I think that's a reflection on me, that I didn't do my due diligence. And more than that, all the advantage would be to you. What's the advantage of me sharing your stuff? It's just diluting my own message. And so the point of this is not for me to say, look at me, I'm so great, and look at how obnoxious I've become. If you think that that's your opinion, you're entitled to it. The point of it is for you to develop more of a backbone for those of you who haven't, and to really know what is it that you bring to the table. Know your self-worth, but also have the honesty to go, you know what? I'm not bringing enough to the table. Remember I said an honest self-inventory? When you do that inventory and you look at your fellow competitors, you might be confronted with an uncomfortable truth, which is, you know what? That contestant, that woman over there, she brings more to the table than I do when it comes time to picking who the best title holder would be. She's a better fit. She's worked harder. She's better at those skills. She's got a bigger network. The judges should pick her. And it's from that place and only from that place where you can seriously improve, genuinely improve, because it comes from a place of self-awareness, not a place of delusion. And so know your self-worth and add tax, but don't be delusional about it. Use this as an exercise in honesty. You will either be one of those people whose inventory hasn't been updated for a long time, in which case, take stock of some of the achievements you've done over the previous few months or few years. On the other hand, maybe you've been glossing over, maybe you've been indulging in too much of these coaches who tell you you're all that, you're perfect, you're great, just be yourself. Maybe that's not enough. Maybe, yes, you just be yourself, but when you come to the interview table, you know that someone else brings more value, can bring more value to the organization than you can. And of course, you can word it in certain ways, like I said, with that world-class thing that business coach told me. I'm not talking about that. Yes, you can. How you present yourself is very important. But there's a certain confidence that comes from knowing you've outworked and outvalued your competitors at every turn. And at that point, if the judges don't pick you, it really doesn't faze you. And I have been at that. I've been faced with a situation like that myself a couple of years ago, and I shared this story, and I'll finish with this. But there was a pageant awards thing going on, and I don't really care for pageant awards because I don't think the way they're judged is anything more than a popularity contest. But they were looking for best sort of pageant media or pageant blogger, and I was up against people who had done fewer interviews than me, produced less content, had produced content with title holders who had achieved less. By any metric, objective metric, I was light years ahead of all the competition. I didn't win. I didn't expect to win. But here's the point. I didn't care. Because if you don't pick me as your winner, I know that whatever you're looking for is a load of crap. And if you did pick me, it's nice and I'll be polite about it, but I don't need your validation. But again, it's because it's not a delusional thing. It's come from the work I put in over the years. The hundreds, literal hundreds of hours I've put in to interviewing for free, producing content for free. And if you're like that, you've put in the hard yards, take that inventory and celebrate who you are. And I talk behind the scenes again with so many title holders who are like this. They are amazing women. And I keep telling them, I don't care whether you won the crown or not. It doesn't change my opinion of you because I think you're an amazing person. So take me up on this. Do a self-inventory. See what comes from it. And if you want to jump on that mock interview, that group mock interview, $19.99 this Thursday, 20th November, 8 p.m. EST. Do the time zone conversions. Again, I will say for us Australians, it's a Friday at noon. But come along. Practice your interview in front of your fellow contestants. Do something that's a bit uncomfortable. It's another chance to put in that hard work, the graft, so you can tell when you get in front of those judges, you can say, I outworked everyone else in this room. I know it because I did this, and this. You may not be saying that, by the way, but you'll know it. And there's a certain unshakable confidence that can come from that. It's not fake it till you make it. It's the real deal. So pageantmock.com if you want to sign up. $19.99 this Thursday, 20th November. Again, if you're one of our paid members, message me for that coupon code so you can enroll for free if you haven't already received it. Hopefully you have received it. But let me leave it there for this week. Have an amazing week, and I'll speak to you next time.